Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, April 6, 2023 Scarborough Board of Education Business Meeting. Diane, can we have the attendance, please?
Sure. Miss Gammon,
Here.
Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Miss Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Mayorino,
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Here.
Ms. Trapani-Huff,
Here.
Miss Bertulia,
Here.
and Mr. Shumway.
Here.
Perfect, thank you. Would everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Agenda item 4.0 are adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening?
No adjustments.
Okay. And agenda item 5.0 is public comment on agenda item. If there's anybody wishing to make public comment this evening, we can line up over here in front of the, or behind the podium area. Oops. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just have you come up one at a time, and the lights that you see in front of you, the green, yellow, red knobs. The green means that you're good to start talking, the yellow means you're almost out of time, and then the red means that comment would be done. So everybody would have 3 minutes for public comment. So if you can just come up and state your name, your full legal name, and then I'll recognize you and we'll get started.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, cool. My name is Beckham Sky O'Leary Sear. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, cool. So do I just go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. So, this policy, right? I support it, and I think it's important because for the protection of trans students, right? I think teachers need to be obligated to protect their rights. Because the consequences, if not, could be disastrous for students, right? Outing trans kids to their parents could lead to being kicked out, disowned, along with mental and physical abuse, right? There's a lot of examples of this, and it's really bad. So it's really important, right, that we protect trans kids and make it a safe space for them, especially on top of all the stuff that could happen if they're outed. There's a wide scale, attacks on queer people in general, and just in general in the US, right? Honestly, it's a genocide, and I don't use that word lightly. Politicians across the US are advocating for the complete abolition of trans people from all aspects of society, right? Look at Florida. Ron DeSantis just proposed expanding the Don't Say Gay bill to high schools, right? Completely outlawing talking about gay people or queer people in general for any of those, just in schools, right? There's anti-drag bills, which are so broad that if you look at them slightly differently, you can completely just ban trans people from just being outside in public. There's currently, right now, there's 451 anti-trans bills being proposed across the US, right? All of this creates massive stress on trans people, obviously, because you have all these people that just don't want them to exist at all. And that just creates a massive stress and anxiety on these people. And that's why we need more inclusive spaces and more just inclusive policies that help these people, make them feel safe and seen, right? And protected, which is why I support this policy. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Owen Keller. Are we good to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wonderful. Hello, like I already said, my name is Owen Keller. I am a junior at Scarborough High School. I'm here to support the adoption of the new transgender and gender expansive student policy. This policy will help further support and protect the transgender students of Scarborough school system. Transgender students are friends, artists, thespians, leaders, and incredibly valuable members of the student body. The clear language of this updated policy will serve to help preserve privacy as well as the safety of these transgender students in our community. It is our duty as this community to support each of its members, no matter their gender identification. This updated policy will move us further towards doing so, hence I'm here to voice my support for its adoption. As an ally of friends, artists, thespians, leaders, and some I would call my second family, I implore the adoption of the updated policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Alex Wu. I am a sophomore at Scarborough High School, and I am speaking in the affirmation of the new proposed transgender student policy. The current transgender student policy, while a good step in the right direction, is not concrete enough in its protection of trans students. This is not to say that a transgender student policy is not necessary, nor that it is a bad idea, but rather the opposite. A new proposed policy effectively must be strong in its language in order to effectively protect trans students. The new proposed policy effectively does this by moving subjunctive verbs such as should or could into the indicative, with verbs like will or shall. Subjunctive verbs are words that can indicate what is wished or imagined to be possible. The problem with this sort of language in our policy is that it is not definitive. We need to be definitive in protecting our students. It must be done. It should not be up for grabs. One such example directly in our current policy is, quote, a meeting should be selected to discuss the student's particular circumstances and needs, end quote. This part of the procedure, while inherently good for the student's needs, will be all null if somebody interprets the should as not requiring further action as a policy supposedly suggests. If our policy does not definitively define what it intends to do, it fails to protect our students. If our policy is flimsy, we allow trans students' rights to be obstructed. If we do not implement our new policy, we fail to protect our students. As a student who is non-binary, I understand there is a discrepancy between what parents want and what students want. However, I ask that the board not take any message of unity to dissuade from passing the policy. Being united in goals is not always the best way to move forward, and sometimes there is a fundamental need to make a stark, sometimes polarizing decision in order to pave the way for a better future. We must be together. We must have unity. But having unity is not a goal. It is not definite. It does not address the wants and needs of students. How can we establish unity when we question identity? When we let ourselves speak for individuality? I am me, handsome is she, pretty is he, beautifully uncompromising are we, because that is us. That is our identity. No matter what is done, it is ours to say. We are the only ones able to define our own selves. We must be imperative and not the wishes, but the present rights of our students. I ask of you not whether or not this policy should be put in place, but rather if students have the right to define their identity. I ask of you that if students explore that identity, do they have the right to a protection in that exploration? I acknowledge that it is a hard decision to make, but I ask, is it your place to make that decision, or is it your responsibility to protect our students and let our students decide for themselves? If we decide now that we are fighting for a better, safer future for all of our trans students, we are setting a precedent not only for caring for our trans students, but putting a precedent on students' rights, opinions, and identities. I ask of you, please put students, our students, above all. Thank you for the time, or thank you for your time.
Okay. Hello, my name is Michelle Oksu Shup. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a teacher, parent, and resident of Scarborough. The views I express today do not represent the views of my school district, but rather they are reflections of my own. I speak in support of adopting the updated transgender and gender expansive student policy. Listen, support, affirm. I've been a teacher for 22 years. I trust children. They have a capacity for understanding and empathy that is incomparable. This capacity is buoyed by access to facts, resources, and trust. It is lifted up by their flexible thinking. The renowned social activist, Dr. Angela Davis, sums it up perfectly. People often say that the youth stand on the shoulders of their elders. But I say, if they're standing on our shoulders, they can see farther than we can. It is hard for us as adults to relinquish control. I know, I'm a parent. I have 3 children. Each of them has their own path and their own spirit. My guiding question has always been, what can I do to help kids be safe and grow in their skills toward the independence of adulthood? The CDC states that the benefits of student autonomy are as such. When students feel their teachers are open to their ideas and allow them to make choices regarding their learning and schoolwork, they are more engaged in school, less disruptive in class, and report feeling a stronger sense of belonging and connectedness to their school, end quote. School board members, I implore us to listen. The students have the vision. The students have the passion. I am also a parent of 3 gender-expansive children in the Scarborough schools. Each of them has their own path and their own spirit. Parents, I implore us to listen. Our kids have the vision. As much as it pains me, I acknowledge that my primary directive as a parent is to provide my children with the tools to leave me someday. That means that I can support them by trusting them with facts, resources, and love. Where they go from there is their choice. It is their responsibility, knowing that as long as we are alive, Mom and Dad will be there to support them if things fall apart. For 22 years, I've tried to support students. My first openly transgender expansive student came out to me in 2006. Since then, I've tried to be there for my students as a trusted adult to let them know that their value is not shaped by what society demands of them. Let us provide them with a clear policy and enable them to give informed consent. School board, let us support them. The students have the vision. The students long for their adults to be brave. I promise I'm skipping to the last paragraph. Do I fear for my children? Yes. A 2011 study by the US Department of Justice has shown that 1 in 2 transgender individuals will be the victim of assault in their lives. Those numbers are higher than 1 in 2 for transgender youth, transgender people of color, transgender individuals living with disabilities, and unhoused transgender people. Do I fear for my students? Yes. The world is often not a kind place. Do I fear for our youth in community with one another? No, because I know your integrity, your passion, and your wisdom. You know who you are. Adults, we not only listen, support, and affirm. Youth, I will leave you with this poem by Andrea Gibson, They, Them. Your name is a gift. You can return it if it doesn't fit.
Thank you.
Hello, can I go?
Yeah, just go ahead and share your name first.
All right, awesome. My name is Reed Shaw. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a senior at Scarborough High School. When I emailed my teachers to come out about 2 years ago, I was sort of scared. What if my teachers didn't approve of this change? What if they refused to call me by my new name and pronouns? What if they called home about it while I'm still not out to my parents? What would happen? It went well. My teachers accepted me and took the changes in stride. They even gave me a moment of class time to come out to my peers. It was a wonderful end of my sophomore year. When I came out to my teachers at the beginning of my junior year, I was sort of scared. What if my teachers refused to respect me? What if they ridicule, or worse, flat out ignore me? What would happen? Everything went fine. My new teachers actively worked to accommodate me, and I got to come out to more of my classmates. What a wonderful junior year. At the beginning of this year, I was sort of scared. Even with my new support system, what would I do if my teachers refused to accept me? Who would I turn to if these people would not support me? Success. But what if I was rejected? I was very lucky to have supportive teachers all 3 years of my high school career as an out non-binary person. But the whole time, I did not know what would happen if something went wrong and my teachers did not know exactly what to do. This new policy makes clear what is to be done when students come out. I do not support this policy for me. I'm a graduating senior. but for the future trans and gender expansive students who will enter the school system. I encourage the adoption of this policy because it clarifies the future of transgender students, and that is a safety that many of us really need to have. So thank you very much.
Before I start, may I just commend the speakers that just stood up here in front of you? That took a lot of courage. I'd just like to say that, especially as a youth. My name is Chip Howe. I'm a 20-year resident of Scarborough. I have 3 daughters, one in middle school, one in college, and my oldest turns 29 on Saturday. As you can tell from my hair and my wrinkles, I've been at this for a while. All of them went through Scarborough schools, and I've had many interactions with teachers and administrators. I also teach at SMCC. I own my own business. I coach Little League softball, and I'm an Air Force veteran. Being a parent for 29 years, I'm here tonight very concerned regarding the school policies under consideration and currently regarding the transgender policy. I have spoken to many parents, and they all feel the school board is setting policies that circumvent parents, and none of the parents I've spoken with agree with that. This creates a culture which is driving a wedge between parents and teachers. Teachers and parents need to partner for the kids' education, which requires honesty and trust, not secrets. The belief and feeling in the community is that each of you on the board are on the board with good intentions. That is why Scarborough voted you onto the board. However, we want you to work on improving our kids' education while at school and leave the parenting decisions to the parents. Unless there is a safety concern, in which for those cases, there are policies to include the Department of Health and Human Services. As part of my review of the current transgender policy changes, it came to my attention the current policy regarding bathroom and locker room use. I was shocked, as were my fellow Scarborough parents many parents that I have spoken with, to know that the policy was for restrooms and locker rooms. Quote, the student is permitted to use the restrooms and locker rooms that most closely match their gender identity. The student shall not be required to use a separate non-communal facility over their objection. My question is, my daughter and her fellow athletes want their privacy and feel safe and to change clothing with only their biological sex teammates in the locker room or bathroom, where there are separate facility, where are the separate facilities ensuring their privacy? Because also in your policy, it says privacy. All students have a right to privacy. So that's a question. Every policy you develop or revise needs to have the wording will include the parents. You nor the teachers are these kids' parents or ultimate decision makers. We, the parents, are. I'd like to ask each of you on the board, on the record, if you as parents, and I know you are all parents, and you all have school students in the school system, with the exception of, from what I understand, one who will have students in the school system here shortly, another year or two. If you're comfortable with the administration making decisions about your children without your input, I'm going to take that as a no. This policy is a change is an example of the schools believing they know more and are better decision makers for our kids than the parents. This must change, as what is next that's going to be kept secret. The child has a drug or alcohol problem, don't tell the parents. The child is suffering from depression, don't tell the parents. Let's keep them in the dark. The child has made suicidal comments, don't tell the parents. Everything having to do with a child must include their parents. Last item is your communication as a board with the community. Goes right along with all of this. Honestly, it is currently terrible, terrible. The way you communicate with the community is awful. You don't. We in Scarborough need to be updated on exactly what you are working on with a direct communication after each meeting and or change you are considering or proposing. This is a request that goes right along with the newsletters that are sent from the administration and from each school at the end of the day on Friday, expecting tired parents to look into this long, repetitive email and find the changes. The changes should be upfront, new information, and then you can have the rest of it behind it. It's a very poor way of doing it. I'm asking you to please work on improving our students' academics. There's plenty to do in that area of the last 3 years of COVID. I think we all can agree with that. And let us be our kids' parents. We don't need these meetings to turn into the meetings and lawsuits. As of yesterday, we see in other Maine communities such as Falmouth, Wyndham, Bonnie Eagle, and Wiscasset. But I can assure you, Scarborough parents are watching and they're energized, as our neighboring communities have already become. Thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions too.
Actually, we don't,
Okay.
public comments just to me as the board chair. We don't, it's not a back and forth.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's just one size fits all here, I think. Chair Lindstrom and esteemed members of the Scarborough School Board, thank you for the opportunity to share a few remarks this evening. My name is Stacy Brenner, and I represent most of Scarborough and all of Gorham in the Maine State Senate. But tonight, I am not here as a senator. I'm here as the loving and proud aunt to a transgender niece. She is a freshman at an Ivy League college as the result of acceptance, love, and most importantly, her hard work. I want to commend all of you for the work you have put forward to develop an appropriate and inclusive, respectful policy for transgender youth here in the Scarborough school system. Your courage to do the right thing for our students and recognize the importance of meeting our transitioning students in the place that they are on their journey is courageous, and most importantly, it is the right path forward. You are all familiar with the statistics and challenges that transgender children experience, so I won't take your time up with that review. Instead, I just want to take a minute to celebrate your proposed policy. It sends a clear message throughout the district that our students are welcome, that we are committed to their needs, we hear their voices, we legitimize their choices, we acknowledge them for who they are, and most importantly, we are committed to their safety and their well-being. Thank you for your empathy, your courage and conviction, and your willingness to acknowledge all of Scarborough's children. I look forward to a forthcoming unanimous vote on the transgender student policy proposal. And as always, I'm here to support all of your good work at the state level whenever needed. Thank you for making time to hear from me tonight and from the public. Thank you for your service to the students of Scarborough, and thank you to the students of Scarborough.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ananda, and I am a senior at Scarborough High School. I just wanted to address the analogy that was brought up earlier about depression, alcoholism, and whatever with the privacy thing. With things of issues like that actually bring health issues or mental health issues again, any type of things that are related to that needs to be addressed, obviously. But being trans is not a major alert to your, or an alert at all to your health or your mental health or anything. This policy is to help kids feel safe. This policy is not to keep parents in the dark, because if you are kept in the dark, maybe your kid actually doesn't feel comfortable telling you. It's really not about keeping parents in the dark. It's more about keeping the kids safe. Thank you.
Is there anybody online wishing to make public comment? If so, if you could please raise your hand in the Zoom function. Okay. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close public comment this evening. Thank you. Agenda item 6.0 is a new school building project update. So on with this, if we could move to the slide deck, I actually have as I'm now thinking, I think the slide is in the wrong place. It's under my chair's report.
You want to switch a
So-
room?
One more. There it is. Okay. On Thursday, April 13th, which is next week, we are having a community forum where we will discuss the new K-3 proposed school solution. And this will include discussion about the site selection process, how the building steering committee has worked to get to the place where they are now, the things that they considered while narrowing down the scope of buildings that they are sites, excuse me, that they were looking at. So this will be an entire overview of the process leading up to what we as a board and town council hope to announce as a potential site soon. All right, is there any questions for me? Or did you want to add anything, Jillian or Brian? We're good. All right. Perfect. Agenda item 7.0 is the superintendent report. So I'll turn this over to Jeff.
All right, I got a musical slide this evening. So I just wanted to take a little time, or my time this evening with the superintendent's report, to just recap a first in Scarborough Public Schools history, which was an all-district choral concert. So you can kind of see the picture here, and then we're gonna have a little bit of a video here too for the last number. But there are students from 2nd grade all the way up through 12th grade on the stage together singing for the first time in the district's history. And this took on a little special significance, I think. Jeff Mosier, who was hired in 2020, which was probably, or maybe it was the fall of 2020, probably the worst possible time for a choral director to be hired, when you're hired for a job that your students can't currently do. There was no singing as part of some of the COVID restrictions and social distancing and all those things. So starting as a choral director in the middle of that presents us challenges. I will say, since that time, the size of the high school chorus has over tripled in size, in part because he gave his time and came up with a pretty creative solution to work together with Kathy Terrell to also start in during the school day program with the 8th grade. So really pushing down into the middle school and then starting to grow the program, and then collaborating with Yvonne Wentz at the middle school and Kristen Goodall at Wentworth. They put together and planned this all district-wide chorus, and I had the pleasure to introduce and get that started. The video is all of them, and so 3rd, 4th, and 5th performed, and then middle school, and then high school. And then in a surprise, a lot of 2nd graders who were in attendance got called up on the stage because they had been working on the same song. That was like the highlight of the whole night. It was like 30 of 2nd graders just bombing down the aisles, so that they could get up on stage and join the big kids. So I don't know if we have an opportunity to play that video, little clip there.
The streets that meet
my expert videography skills on my iPhone right there at work, but it was just, it was a really special night. And you can't obviously tell from my video, but the house was packed. I mean, there were very few empty seats, so it was a really fun night. And that was March 28th. That's all I got.
Oh, thank you. Pardon me. Sorry. Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Jeff? All right, agenda item 8.0 is the chair's report. I have a very brief, a couple of things to talk about. The first is that we are hiring currently in the district. We have quite a few positions available for anybody who's interested, or if you know of somebody who is interested in working for our district. These include things like custodians, bus drivers, educational technicians, substitute teachers, food service workers. So really positions across quite a few positions across the board. So if you are interested in working for what I would say we would all think is the best district in the state of Maine, then we would really encourage you to apply or consider passing along the word if someone you know may be interested in working. I don't want to steal Carolyn's thunder. She's going to talk about this, but were you going to talk about the updated schedule to the potential schedule to the budget process? Okay, so the town council, sorry to put you on the spot. The town council discussed it there at our board workshop. We had not a board workshop, but their workshop, town council workshop, budget workshop. There is a potential for a change in the budgetary process this year. They do not have audit results yet. So there is a potential that everything, and when I say everything, I mean the first readings of the budget will be pushed back by 2 weeks. So if that is something that is approved, that would include the referendum that would also be pushed back 2 weeks to so closer to the end of the June timeframe. So we are closely watching that and working with town council. And once we hear more and we know more, we can update the board and the community at that point.
Just to clarify, we have no control over that schedule.
No. We do not. It's a great question.
Also, we don't know exactly, we don't have like a window date, like within a couple days or anything.
No, I believe that they have to vote on it. And I think from what I could gather, was that your impression too, that they have to vote on that? The town council being they have to vote on that decision? Yeah, so I don't know when we would hear. I think they're still waiting to hear about the audit first. And so they're trying to make it work within the parameters of when they think that they'll have that. And they seem to think that a 2-week window would buy them the time they need.
And what is the process typically like with the town council? I probably should ask you this privately.
Oh, no.
But do they accept it? Or I'm assuming that they give feedback and say, hey, this is great, or hey, add a little here, or hey, probably take off a little here. That's maybe more the way it goes, but but is that, what's the typical process?
Yeah, that's a great question. They have a goal, the town council has a goal to keep the overall budget within a 3% increase. So if the number comes above that, falls above the 3%, they do ask both the town and the school to make cuts to make it work within their prescribed goal. So the problem or the difficulty is of course, as you know, with inflation, with increased pricing, it has made contracts a little bit more expensive. We were fortunate with our fuel contract. The town just recently increased theirs, or just signed theirs. So they not as fortunate. We were kind of locked into one. So there are some changes that have made the increases I guess necessary would be the right verbiage. We still have items in motion, as you know, and so does the town side as well. So the insurance, the things that we just don't have clear, hard, firm numbers on, the town is in the same boat. So as those kind of get finalized throughout the process, that will help as well. And then as we discussed among the board members and the town council at the workshop, we did get a surprise with state subsidy. So okay, I'm not gonna say that at all. I'm gonna leave that for you. That was great news and we will hear about it in a moment. But yeah, so that is really their prescribed process to kind of really stay at that 3% or less. There any other questions for me? No? All right, so agenda item 9.0 are committee reports. So first, oh, look at this. We'll go to you, Carolyn.
Oop, I wrote so small, I think I need my reading glasses to read that. Finance Committee, we were busy in the month of March. We met 3 times and also attended a town council committee workshop as well, in addition to those meetings. So we covered a lot of ground. The first one was we agreed to utilize some budgeted funds that were slated for the consolidated school pre-work to hire a consultant. That's going to help us more effectively educate the public about the new school project. We also discussed about the phase 2 of the track and turf project. And because where the track and turf currently lies, it was under consideration at one point in time for a site for the new school. And so we ended up replacing the turf and left the track for a later date because the turf could be picked up and moved, whereas the track couldn't. So we had a lot of discussions and actually a second meeting to discuss that because we were talking about, do we forego the bid process and go this co-op route? And so we had Kate and her team look into that a little more closely as to what does that mean. And we decided to go forward with the co-op route. We went with the 2 co-ops and basically getting a bid from them. And it's basically almost doing the bid process in a quicker time and with better or as good results. So we decided to move forward with that. And the goal is getting it done more quickly, getting it done in time for fall sports and getting a really fair price as well. So we have we had initial budget 1.9 for the project track and turf, and we have 1.15 million left to spend on doing the track. So we reviewed the 24 budget and we, along with net savings that have been found since we put together or I shouldn't say we, that was not a we. The Leadership Council put together, there's been about $90,000 of savings found. And in addition to that, Shannon stole my thunder and I know we have also received word from the state. Maybe I can thank you, Stacy, for maybe you found the error. I don't know. We'll give you credit. But anyway, Scarborough should be receiving about an additional $1.5 million in funding, which truly helps the town. We participated in 2 budget workshops along with the School Leadership Council. Everybody was able to attend those. And we attended the Town Council workshop on the 29th, where the draft budget was presented at a 4.59% increase over FY 2023. Our next meeting is on the 24th of April at 3:30. Come and join. Happy to have you, right, Jillian? Absolutely.
Well, and not to steal Kate's thunder, but at that meeting, we'll also have some more good news to share with the health insurance numbers coming in at a little over 3%, even though we budgeted for 8%.
That's huge.
So that is going to drive that number down even further.
Wow.
That's really exciting news.
Wow, that's great news. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we'll all act surprised when Kate presents it to us. Don't worry.
Good job. It's not like this is on tape or
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to add to Carolyn's, there is a lot that has happened. So first, thank you to everybody who has attended. I know this is a lot. There's a lot that happens during this time typically. So thank you for everybody for being willing to come and attend and be a part of all of the things that we have been doing related to the budget. we do have two upcoming roundtables with town council that we are going to participate in. Yeah, so one is going to be Monday night from 5 to 7, and the other one, I believe, 24th, thank you, is the 24th from 5 to 7. So that'll be two opportunities for the public to come in and really talk with counselors and school board members about what their concerns are or what they agree with in the budget, answer any questions they have. And move forward. The one on the Monday 9th will be here. The one on the 24th is in the library. Are there any questions for Carolyn? Okay, thank you. Freyla.
The policy committee also had some extra meetings this month. We had two, one on March 6th, one to March 20th. We were really trying to work on that transgender, gender expansive students policy. Not going to talk about it now because we're going to talk about it later. The next meeting is Monday on April 10th. It's going to be a little bit of a marathon session from 4 to 6:30. It's a hybrid meeting held in central office. The agenda items, I didn't list them all. It's all of the legally required policies since the state laws have changed in the last year to get us completely up to date so that all of our policies are in order and in line with what the state requires us to do. And those are posted, so you're welcome to read them at your leisure. And then after that, sort of determining the order. Diane, I have to thank, created a policy creation flow chart that I was hoping to send to Kelly this afternoon to get up there. It's not there, but I'm going to ask her to post it on the website later. It is extremely helpful, and it goes through step by step how policies are created for this through this board. And so everybody in the community can read it and really understand the process that it undergoes and where they can sort of, if they want to participate, the levels of participation they're welcome to be involved with. And Diane really took it on her own. It was very helpful for me because I'm new to policy to really have it laid out in a step-by-step process. So thank you. We'll get that on the website. I'll get that to Kelly tomorrow. And I hope that people find it as informative as I did.
Thank you, Freyla. Are there any questions for Freyla? All right, Brian.
All right, so our last meeting was March 8th. We discussed a handful of different things. A lot of them were based around the curriculum improvement and approval process. There was quite a bit of exciting news that I think was shared during the meeting, which hopefully before the end of the school year, we'll be able to update you and maybe even kind of put on display for you. One of those is the fact that we've had requests from the public. Many of you have seen them before, to get our curriculum out front and in the open, and how can, parents and anybody really coming to town be able to access that. And so this is something that is being worked on behind the scenes. There's a landing page that's, it's my third bullet down there, but it's probably the most significant of things that I believe that we spoke about, just because it's something that has been a big desire in the community. And it's something that Monique gave us a little bit of a sneak peek at, and I think a lot of us were very impressed with how it's coming out, and just, how they're really making sure to be as detailed as possible to make sure that the public is aware of that. Jumping back a second, the curriculum internal guide, I also think is interesting. And I mentioned to Monique, it might be interesting to share that with us, because this is actually what the teachers on the inside and the staff are using. So this is private to them, but it's how they actually go about staying organized. And it is, as a former teacher, I wish I had that. And I said that to her. I really think that it speaks volumes as to why Scarborough's school district has the reputation it has. And just the flow that we have from grade to grade, making sure that kids are learning something new each year and we're not being repetitive, but we're touching on those points. It is just very, very organized behind the scenes to see how things flow from K all the way up to our seniors. We talked about what the vetting process was like for curriculum materials to be reviewed. So that was also something that we've had some questions about. It's a two-step process that she had explained to us. They vet for quality, but I also found it interesting to know that they actually take what they're thinking about putting into place, implementing, and they're getting the schools, they're getting teachers' input. They're also going to other schools as well and getting the input to see how is this curriculum, how might it look elsewhere? And, you know, is it worthwhile in implementing? So it was, in general, I think the last meeting was very educational for a lot of us. One of the other notes that we've had a lot of questions about was the Civil Rights Club and the curriculum. Basically, we talked about what it is and how it's a club that happens afterwards and the approval process that goes into that. Without spending an extensive amount of time here, I would encourage a lot of the public to go back and actually view our meeting about that. And the reason for that is because we've had a number of questions on it. And I think that it would be important for people to actually hear from Monique exactly how it's worded, because I didn't want to go through the process and say something necessarily wrong when she is the person who I think she put it very eloquently as to how she explained the entire process and how it goes through. But we all, I feel like, walked away, asked our questions, and I feel like we had a good understanding of comfort as to how the club gets approved to go work with some of our students in the district. And there is an extensive process that goes into that, which I think was great to be able to see and just to learn about. So our upcoming meetings, we're going to be debriefing and discussing questions about some of our previous curriculum committee meetings. So things like some of the topics I just discussed, if anybody has follow-up questions, as well as the curriculum budget and the recent SEL workshop. And then Monique wanted to cover the ESSA process and application process as well. So our next meeting, if anybody would like to join, is via Zoom, and it's always our second Wednesday of every month. So it'll be April 12th next week.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for Brian? All right, thank you. Jillian, you're next.
All right, so we met March 9th. We are still developing a plan for our first roundtable. We were in the process of getting a space. We continue to look for Spotlight Awards. Looking forward to reading some of those nominations. And then we're going to be ramping up with more budget communication. So we'll see what that looks like. Our next meeting is April 13th at 4:30 by Zoom.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for Jillian? Right, okay, John, long range planning.
Yes, we had our last meeting was on the fourth Tuesday. We'll give a shout out to Diane for taking fantastic notes, and she did a great job. So I stole most of them. We reviewed a lot of the capital projects outlined, the most recent budget book. If you go into the agenda, they're all listed there. You didn't miss any, did you, Diane? Okay, good. Just making sure. And you know, we were talking about how we have a finite window of opportunity to complete any of the projects that come up. You know, it's weekends, any breaks, summer vacation, whenever nobody's in the school, so that they have the time to get things done. So that will limit what projects we can and can't take on, because you can't take on too many, or you might have to make sure that you can get them done. A lot of the credit that we have for how great our schools, what the shape that they're in, has got to go to Todd and his crew. He was saying that he was out at another school in where was it, Wyndham, and he said that school was built 1 year, or at least remodeled a year after the high school, and he said just the high school looks, but our high school looks like it's just, you can tell the difference. So whatever he's doing, I don't know if he has magic dust or whatever, it's working, and he deserves a lot of credit. We discussed some projects. First, the big one, middle school portables are well beyond their life expectancy, and of course the cost to replace them has gone up dramatically. I think he said a couple of years ago it was about 350,000 each, and now they're up at about 500,000 per, and we have 12, so that would cost the town $6 million just to replace those for sixth grade. So, and yeah, I mean, I won't even get into any more of that. And then we have security risks at different schools, that that going in through the entrances, making sure that you have to have the proper safety measures in place, and they're not all like that. So we would at some point need to figure that out possibly. So we'll see what happens with that. Then we discussed what we need to focus on, what the committee can do moving forward. And we're looking at project items that are within our 5-year plan, and how to make them fit on a year-to-year basis in a balanced way. So it's like, what can we get done? What do we have, what can we get the money for? What do we have the time for? And what needs to be done? So there's a lot to figure out. But because we got a lot of facilities but again, Todd's doing a great job, and he's got my vote. Keep his job forever. But if you want to go look at any of this information, like I said, Diane took great notes, and they're on the agenda on the website.
Perfect, thank you.
And our next meeting is TBD.
Are there any questions for John? All right, thank you. Freyla and Jillian, DEI.
I'm happy to do it. The DI committee had a phenomenal meeting on March 21st. It was our only meeting in March. We meet every 3 weeks. And we started drafting and outlining a strategic plan, which was extremely exciting for me. If you've ever heard me talk about the DEI committee in the past. On one hand, and I think there's some really concrete ideas about how we move forward in a way that we can then come back to this board and sort of demonstrate what the plan is, because that's what I would like to see happen. The thing that is still something that we need to work on, and a challenge, is the quorum issue. We haven't made quorum this year. So if we had any ideas to actually move forward on, such as changing our schedule so it might be more friendly for people, because every 3 weeks is hard for most people to track. We can't do that without more board members there. So I know there's a plan to bring forward the seats that are empty, to fill them with people to try to get to a quorum so that we can do that. And I think that at our next meeting, I expect the membership to be increased. We've had a number of applicants, both all community, from students, and also from educators. So we're excited about bulking that committee up and hopefully get some new energy in there so that we have more productive meetings. But it wasn't an exciting meeting from probably anyone's perspective, other than like, let's actually outline how we're going to do this work, which again, you all know me on the process. I found it very exciting, but it wasn't full of interesting information. It was like, how do we vote things forward? But it was a good productive meeting.
Are there any questions for Jillian or Freyla? I'm excited to see them get some concrete under their feet, right? To get to, I'm gonna just set that over there. To get some some momentum going in, to be able to get some things accomplished. So this will be exciting to watch.
I had limited ability to interact due to a slight home emergency, but what I was able to hear, you guys did a really great job. I was really impressed, and your leadership there is huge.
All right, Jillian and Brian, the building steering committee.
I'll go. All right. So supposed to silence that. We've met with Laura Petrolino, who's the PR consultant. She's helping us with our educational public outreach. We have met with her a number of times to go over some strategies to get information about the building out into the community. And as Shannon had already pointed out, we are going to have a community forum next Thursday at 6 p.m. at Pleasant Hill School. In the what is it, cafegimatorium there. And we're continuing to I say we, again, the professionals are continuing to develop a business case, and our next meeting is the 25th at 6:30. And that is also available hybrid, and all these meetings are recorded and available to watch on the website.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
I know, when we last met with the town council for a workshop or whatever that, I can't remember what it was, but feels so long ago. They had asked for updated numbers on some of the scenarios. Has that work been completed? I know we were expecting that soon and just checking on the progress of that.
It has not been fully completed yet.
Okay.
They, once they got their enrollment numbers, they are continuing to work that. There's quite a bit of work that goes into that. Yeah, looking at it, it's overwhelming, but yes, they're continuing to work on that.
Yeah, and can I just piggyback on that a little bit? They, in addition to updating the numbers and the business case, part of what they're doing is they're looking at what's called massing. So it's like essentially almost like if you were a drone looking down on the site of each school, and they are reimagining the site based on what we have said we need for each school. So think about like bus drop-offs and parent-student drop-offs and play space and parking spots. And so once they have all of that outlined per building, then really like drilling down to, okay, this is what's left over for an actual building size. So they're doing that so that they can determine what can actually fit on each site. So that's part of this update as well. So that's why they're really spending some time to dig into Jillian's point. Yeah.
I was just gonna say the same thing, and I've been thoroughly impressed with what they came out with. They kind of gave us a preview of what that's starting to look like. I believe they used the Pleasant Hill Elementary School as, and it wasn't fully done, but they gave us bits and pieces of it. And I didn't even know, honestly, that they were working to that scale to show us. I knew they were working on something similar. So, I mean, they're being incredibly thorough. So I think the next meeting, whether you tune in or you look at it afterwards, or at least when we have our next report out, we should have some pretty good info to share with you, I think.
Right. Our liaison reports are next. I know Brian has a couple, so I was gonna say, do you want to just do yours back to back? And then we can open it up.
So for the district emergency management team, again, just as a reminder, so this is a lot of the police officers, this has teachers, administrators, the fire department, a little bit of everybody, key players in terms of safety within the town getting together. So there's some really interesting stuff that's happening that I think, it just shows that we are keeping our students and the safety as at the forefront of what we do here in the school district. One of the biggest things that the technology department has been doing is they're partnering with the transportation department, and they're coming out with these RFID cards, which I am thoroughly fascinated by, where kids, they're going to start to do a test run basically within the next couple of weeks. I don't know if is it next week? Okay. So on Tuesday. Okay, awesome. So is it just one bus route or 2 bus routes? Okay. So kids are actually going to be able to log in basically with this key card. They kind of scan it as if you go up to a door and kind of how it opens and whatnot. And on the screen of the bus that the bus driver will have, it will show a picture of that child. So let's say they forget their key card. It's kind of a way for the bus driver, they can kind of plug them in, look them up and say, okay, Johnny got on the school bus at this specific address. So you can actually see where the kids are getting on and off of the bus, which I think from a safety standpoint, especially this day and age, is tremendous. So at this point, it's being rolled out slowly. That's starting as a pilot to see how it goes. And then from there is another phase where it could be evolved into parents being able to see exactly where their kids are and if they got dropped off at what time, what address, things like that. So pretty crazy to see what technology has come out with these days. So that's one thing that we had a pretty good discussion on, I would say. And In addition, a bunch of the administrators had mentioned the Raptor system, which is what we use when parents or really anybody tries to check into our schools. And they had mentioned that they've had a lot of really positive parental feedback on that, and that they actually hadn't heard anything negative, which I think is really good to see, especially since that's been a big investment just townwide. What was that?
That's remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. So it was nice to hear that stuff, that if we're using it, and there's a lot of other elements to Raptor, which we haven't gone into in depth, but we've touched on them a little bit to say there are other things that can be tied into Raptor that could also help to keep our district safe and our students and whatnot. I thought you guys would also find it interesting to know what they're doing behind the scenes when we're sitting here, what's happening during the daytime sometimes, or during some of those PD days, is they are having what do they call them? Table talk topics, where they're running through emergency type scenarios of everything under the moon that you can think of. And teachers and administrators are getting a chance to kind of have a say and talk about how would you react in those particular circumstances. So that includes the police department, the fire department, and we talked about making sure that cybersecurity is a big part of that as well. So that's something that most likely will be a topic moving forward. But nice to know that that's kind of how they're preparing behind the scenes, especially when we see a lot of scary things on the TV these days. That's one thing that we are trying to do as a district to be more proactive, and it's nice to hear that. So our next meeting is May 24th, and we are actually going to be meeting over in dispatch around the corner in the police and fire building. Because if there was actually a major incident, that is most likely where Jeff and Diane would end up being with police and fire. So they opened up the doors to us, and that's where we're going to kind of have a little field trip next week, which I think would be really good for us to see what else is available in the district. So, questions?
Questions on this update? All right. Oh, do you have a?
I just got a pretty sweet conference room over there. So that it's a nice space.
All right, do you want to do your second one too?
So the vocational one, we had a bit of a communication issue, and at the last minute, they swapped locations on me. So yeah, Jeff and I are in communication now, and we're making sure that if that gets swapped again, I know where it goes. So I showed up and they were like, oh yeah, that got moved. I was like, when? So Jeff was there. I don't know if you want to provide any insight there, but
Other than an apology to you for not making you aware of the change in the location, I'll stick with that. No, it was a very good meeting. And not a ton of things to report in particular. So.
All right, are there any other liaison reports that anybody has? All right. Student reports.
All right, so Jeff touched on it earlier, but students at the Wentworth Chorus Club, as well as second graders through 12th graders, participated in the district-wide all choral concert. Each age group performed their own sections, and at the end of the concert, every group performed together for the finale. And it overall just shows a fun event that showcases all the talent within the schools through every age group. And that looked really cool. And then secondly, also at Wentworth, Wentworth concluded its first ever Geography Bee on March 29th. The top 10 finalists answered very demanding geography questions in front of an audience of peers. And here's a picture of the 3 finalists.
Over at the middle school, they're performing Into the Woods Junior. And so they had 2 performances last weekend. They have one Friday and one Saturday for this upcoming weekend. I haven't been, but it looks like they have some really cool props going on. So definitely something to check out. On the next slide, We have, as part of the Developmental Delay Awareness Month, the Buddy System sponsored an educational opportunity at Pleasant Hill, Blue Point, and Eight Corners. They had a lot of authors to come to visit to each school, sort of share stories of inclusion, acceptance, and friendship. And the Buddy System also participated in presentations, sort of teaching the K-2 students about the importance of inclusion for everyone. On the next slide, if it switches. We have some art. So in collaboration with the Maine Art Education Association, the Portland Museum of Art is presenting artwork made by young artists in our communities. And so Scarborough has 2 students currently in that artwork display. I have a little link on the bottom if anyone wants to check out that whole display. And we have a cool thing going on at the high school. So a fellow senior, Anita Smith, she's insane at drawing dragons. That is the coolest thing ever to see. And one day in the hallway to the art department, that black wall popped up, and the next day there was a giant dragon, and it's 28 feet long. It's insane up close. There's so much detail, and it's really cool. She went through an approval process with Ms. Ketch, so there's some school colors involved in there as well. So we got a nice school spirit dragon in our hallways now.
Wow.
I don't have a slide for it, but also we are starting the search for a new junior rep. I'll be leaving soon, and Colby will be becoming senior rep. So that's starting up slowly.
I don't want to talk about it, but thank you. Are there any questions for either Yulia or Colby?
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I think we had some really good publicity, but also I know my daughter was at Eight Corners and got to meet the Wenzel family, and the book, A Dog and His Boy, came home to our family, and that was a very meaningful experience for her. So I think that was a really incredible opportunity for their district. And it was very touching for my family specifically.
Thank you for that. All right. 11.0 is new business. 11.1 is the first reading of policy ACAAA, transgender and gender expansive students. So first, do I have a motion to approve the first reading?
So moved.
Second. Okay. I'm going to open it up for discussion, but before I do so, I do want to invite Melissa up, Melissa Huey, to answer any questions we might have. Just if you don't mind. Yeah, or in the front row or wherever you feel the most comfortable, but you have to be on the mic. So yes, please, if you wouldn't mind coming up.
Can we amend the motion to group 11.1, 11.2 because they go together?
Yeah, we can do that. So the question is, can we amend, can we amend the motion to include the first reading of policy ACAAA and the first reading of policy ACAAE, which is a transgender student support plan. So do I have a motion to bundle those and approve both at first reading?
So moved.
Second. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for any discussion. And to my earlier point, Melissa is here to answer any questions we have as it relates to our policy or any state laws that would cover students and parents, federal laws, anything we have as it relates to this policy. So I'll open it up. Are there any questions or discussion?
I would probably have 15 questions, but I'll start.
Let's do them one at a time.
At a time. But Shannon and I were talking earlier over the weekend, I think it was. We were talking about in the policy that we currently have or that we're looking at adopting, what aspects of it are like required by law and which ones are maybe above and beyond, or is there?
So that's a hard question to answer because the law doesn't require that you have a policy at all. The law requires that you don't discriminate against any student, including transgender students. So technically, your ACA policy probably covers you from a required policy standpoint. So if that's what you're asking me, the answer is nothing. If you're asking me, are there certain things in the policy that are legally required and certain things that are not, there are certain provisions that in my view are legally required. For example, the provision that transgender students should be permitted to use facilities and restrooms and locker rooms that are consistent with the gender with which they identify. A lot of the rest of the policy is really, as I understand it, intended to be supportive of students. I don't, transgender students and all students. I'm not sure I would say that's extra, but it's not something that there is any specific law that requires that.
Can I ask a follow-up to that question? So I think what you said, like by leading into that is, I understand the locker room and the restroom portion, which is it's been established through a law court decision, which is Maine law and the Maine Human Rights Commission. But the rest of the policy will not required if a administrator or a staff member violated a student's constitutional rights, that would be a problem. And one of the things this policy does is provide guidance to avoid that.
Exactly.
It's not legally required, but
And I will say that there are other things in the policy, for example, names and pronouns, although that isn't specifically addressed in the law court case, the Doe versus RSU 26 case, it is certainly a reasonable extension of that also would be required by law. So that's that, there are certain things in there that are required, but you're right. The policy provides guidance to make sure that staff, other students, don't violate students' rights.
So am I hearing that with regards to pronouns, a teacher, it's not an infringement on their First Amendment rights of free speech as to choosing whether or not they use the pronouns preferred by a student? Are you saying by potential law that's coming that they would have to?
So I don't think that a teacher has a First Amendment right to refer to anybody about anything in a classroom. That's really not a part of the analysis here. The analysis is that schools are required not to discriminate against students. And one way that you would discriminate against a transgender student would be treating them differently than other students who identify as the same gender. So one way, the way that was dealt with in the law court case is in using bathrooms. We allow all students who identify as one particular gender to use a bathroom. So whether they're that's consistent with their assigned gender at sex or not is irrelevant. It is what they identify with, which what the law court looks at. Same thing with pronouns. We call all students by the pronoun of the gender with which they identify, regardless of their sex at birth. And that's, I think, what the law court would require.
Can I just want to follow up on that, and because I want to be sure that we're all, and I think it's good for the community to hear as well. If we did not have this policy sitting in front of us, we currently have a policy. If we had no policy whatsoever regarding transgender students or gender expansive students, the state law and the law case that has come before the state and has gone to the state Supreme Court and the guidance from the Maine Human Rights Commission would say that we have got to allow students to use a facility that matches the gender they identify with. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
That's 15 is a lot less than I thought. Man, I thought I was bad at math. You went on the finance?
I've got so many. Yeah. So let's see, I'll just start at the top. And this might be better served. I'm not sure the right way to do it because I don't want to take everybody's time. And I'm sure everybody else has a bazillion or have their own questions. So I don't know if it's better if I email I can't do
No,
that.
go ahead. Yeah, this is,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. You should
All
have
right.
all your questions answered before you
Okay.
vote. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
apologize ahead of
No,
time, but
no,
it's just me, my brain and how it works.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to also commend the students who are here speaking. They were extremely eloquent. They did a fantastic job speaking, and I know it's hard and it took a lot of bravery, and I commend that. And I want to make sure as well that every child here and every child that may be listening at home know that they, no matter if we agree or disagree on certain issues, they are loved and they are respected. And agreement or disagreement has nothing to do with love and respect. So I just want to put that out there as well. So question one, is there any significance to, I noticed that this policy is like AC, AAA, and the old one was JB. I don't know if it's a question for you or for, is there a distinction with that, or is it just a new numbering, lettering system? Does that mean anything? Doesn't-
It's where it falls within our policy guidelines. So when it was a J policy, it fell under students. Now that it's an A policy, it falls under foundations and basic commitments.
Okay.
And just as an addition, that is consistent with, like, if you look at where our discrimination policies
Mhm.
live, ACAA, that is also in section A. So.
Okay, all right, thank you. And so Shannon, this might be a question for you. I'm not 100% sure, but based on the conversation we had the other day when we were talking about this policy
Mhm.
is more pertaining to students requesting a plan. At least that was my understanding from when we talked, as opposed to, a student who is socially transitioning, but not requesting a plan. Is that, when I was reading like through the purpose, I didn't see that like defined, but maybe it's more once you get to section C. Anyway, it just wasn't clear to me when reading through the policy that this is only specific to children requesting a plan.
I think can I take that question?
Yeah.
All right, so with the policy, the purpose section A is the purpose statement of the section, which is pretty consistent with it. And the policy is similar to the JB policy. The language is different. It's a little bit expanded, but overall it's fairly similar. Overall, it's in the details that the language was tightened up. I think it's one of the things that's become more definite and less recommended or guidance and more shalls and wills. There's a definition section that's fairly brief.
Yeah.
And then the C is the addressing the needs of transgender and gender expansive students. The main part of this policy really focuses around when there's an issue that services requiring administration to become involved, a building administrator, to create a support plan to support our transgender and gender expansive students. And meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And so most of the plan focuses on what that looks like. And that's why I asked to include 11.2, because the support plan form is attached. That's the appended form. That would be the guidance for how that meeting is conducted. And that's what the main policy focuses around. So if there's an issue at school that's identified by a parent, so there's no secrets in this meeting, a parent is part of this meeting, the student can also request it, or a building administrator, if there's a problem that they identify with administering their school, can also call a meeting, which a parent, there are no secrets, a parent will be informed, and a student will be invited to, everyone's invited to the table to address whatever the need is. And that need can be as varied as our students, whether it's an external issue or an internal student. It's really intended to be a forum to address issues that are surfaced to the point where we require administrative intervention. After that, section D is really just general guidelines, which has to do especially with the legal requirements to ensure that staff are informed and understand if they have any questions, they can be guided by the policy, so they don't inadvertently tried inadvertently, or if they have questions about how they treat a student, if they don't know, this policy is intended to give them clear guidance on how to do that. And that's really what D is. That's the privacy statements, the school record statements, the names, the pronouns, the facilities, and all that. And then the last section is really a minor. It allows the superintendent and the administration to create training programs if one's required for that.
Okay. Can I just jump in there and add one thing? Because I think one of the questions you may have been asking is whether that meeting is always required or whether it has to be requested. And I know that there are a number of policies, and it used to be that most policies that dealt with these issues required the meeting. It has been our recommendation that requirement be removed from the policies. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is really directed towards the students and the feeling that just because you're gender expansive, you shouldn't be called to a meeting. That should be your choice, and that should be your family's choice. If you want that, that support is there, but we're not forcing you to do that. And that's what we're hearing from experts is a more supportive way of dealing with students. The second thing is more of a legal consideration. And what I'm telling you, and what the law court is telling us, is we shouldn't be treating students differently because of their sexual identity. And so if we require people who are gender expansive to go to meetings, but we don't require other students to go to meetings like this, then that seems a little bit discriminatory. So what we're saying here, as Freyla, I guess I should be calling you board member Tarvinian said, is that this is a support mechanism. Straight out. If that's what people feel is needed, then it ought to happen. If that's what not needed, then we're not going to require people to do it. And I think that that's a better policy, both from the student's perspective and from a legal perspective.
Do you mind if I jump in just a second, Carolyn? Because that's a really good point that you make, because we've had, I know that there has been some discussion among community members and board members regarding, well, aren't we supposed to have policies that cover and protect all kids? And my answer to that is we do have policies that protect and cover all of our children. But this one in particular, if we mandated, I guess that's new information. So I just want to be sure I heard you clear. New for me. If we mandated these support hearings, then we could be potentially in violation of discrimination laws.
Right, because you're mandating it for one type of student and not another, and that's potentially discriminatory.
Perfect, thank you.
I just find that discouraging. To be honest, with you, I as a parent, I find it discouraging from a couple standpoints, and I'm just going to speak that there's no safer place for a child than their family, and for a family not to be included on such a large important decision. I'm not sure exactly what the right word is to call it, to not have a meeting. So the family is brought in and kept in the loop and part of putting together a plan and being informed. And
So can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah,
Because I
if
think
I'm
you're,
going
I think you're misunderstanding
okay,
me.
good.
And that's why I want to interrupt you. This isn't about family versus school. This is about who feels that that a meeting is necessary. And the way it's written, as I understand it, if the student feels they need the support of a meeting, then the meeting will happen. If the parent feels they need the support of a meeting, the meeting will happen. If an administrator feels that this is a necessary support, the meeting will happen. So this isn't about driving any wedge between anybody. It's just saying anybody who has a stake in this can reach out and ask for support. And our policy, and I don't mean our policy, I mean your policy, says if you want it, parent, student, anybody, we're going to give it to you. And we're telling you this so that you all know that this is available. It's really not about any keeping anybody out, as I heard you say.
Yeah, and I shouldn't speak for Farrell and Jillian, but I'm going to say I'll speak for our committee. We spent, a long time working on this to make sure, and I'm going to be very transparent here. I'm a little bit perplexed. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around some of the comments this evening, because we started this conversation 4 months ago saying parents absolutely should be at the table. And we ended our conversation a week ago saying parents absolutely should be at the table. So maybe to me, it seems clear. Maybe we're missing something. I mean, we have gone through this document and added parents into every single conversation that should happen. And this, if you read through our adjustment, not you, if anybody reads through our adjustments, that is really a big chunk of what we have worked on. We absolutely, in our conversations, agree that parents absolutely should be part of the conversation and that parents belong at the table when we're discussing their students. I'm struggling a little bit with how we can be clearer on that, I guess. So if you have any feedback, that would be great.
I think I hear you maybe asking what would trigger a meeting. Is that like you're looking for that?
Yeah.
Is that what I understand?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have a good answer for that? I am not.
Yeah, I think, just to restate, like, what would trigger a meeting is an individual, kind of a party to the situation in my head. So a student, a family member, guardian, parent, guardian, or an administrator or staff member at the school who's stepping forward and saying there's an issue here that needs to be addressed. That would trigger the meeting. And we systematically went through the policy, and in the places where there was latitude given in terms of students' rights to privacy, which is a concern, and parents' rights to information, we really did a very careful balancing test at each of those junctures and tried to have as much fidelity to the law, which, to be really clear, this policy is mostly tied up in law. I mean, there's not a lot of discretion here. In my head, there's a lot of like mechanics on exactly how, but there's not a lot of discretion in terms of what we can or can't do to support our students who would identify with this policy, and without, treading over the line again of treading into discriminatory behavior, such as, as soon as a student manifests something that makes a staff member or somebody at the school, say maybe there's an issue here, suddenly is required to go to the principal's office for a meeting, because that's not very supportive conduct. And I don't think it's legal, just to be very clear. But where we could build in the parents, we didn't give, we were urged by some students, especially, to give students a right to consent to parental notification. And we elected not to do that. One, I think there would be inherent conflict with FERPA eventually, because any sort of documented conduct parents have a right to that information by law. So they would have a right to access that information. But also we don't the school doesn't have a place in the parent-child relationship. To be very clear, the school does not have a place there. The school has is obligated and responsible for educating our students, meeting them where they are, and supporting them through that process so that we can deliver the highest quality education possible. We don't want to, nor should we be involved in any sort of disagreement between parents and children. Like that's up to the parents and children to deal with their relationship. The school needs to educate them, keep them safe, and support them while they're at school. And, there's a lot of language that I'm concerned about that's sort of like creating divides between parents and children, secrets, hiding things from parents. This policy does not do that in any level. To be very clear, there's no secrets. The school does not keep secrets. We're a governmental organization. Our records are subject to FOIA. And there's some statutory carve-outs that we can't do anything about, having to do with counseling records. But I'll leave that fight to a completely different committee at a different day. So, like our responsibility is to keep our students safe and make them feel supported. And part of that is also supporting their families. Let's be clear, we can't tilt that balance. We don't want to be in that equation. And that was the guiding spirit of this policy, which is to invite everyone to the table everywhere we can. Because everyone is right. Parents and children working together with schools is the ideal. Whenever we have one of those, for educational purposes, for parenting purposes, you're right. We don't have school doesn't have a right or obligation that shouldn't be involved in parenting children. Like that's not our job. That's not our role. But we do have an obligation to meet students at school to make sure that they feel safe and supported so that they can learn and so that we can create a vibrant environment here. And then hopefully they take that home with them.
Okay, thank you. So maybe there's just some tightening in the language that I found in a couple places. I think it's C2, the second sentence where it says and or parents. I'm wondering if that should be and parents. I think it was also D1C, the last sentence, it said and or parents. And it could be, I might be reading it incorrectly or misinterpreting it. I'm wondering if that should say and parents at D1C. D2, the top of page 4 says the superintendent should be consulted and the matter resolved in case-by-case basis. And just wanted to make sure that that doesn't override C3 where parents are involved. And sometimes I think one of the students pointed out as well about the use of the word should versus, I think in a lot of legalese, we see shall. I think should maybe leaves room for ambiguity, maybe interpretation, that's a good word. Okay.
Can we go line? Like,
Yeah, can we go back?
Okay,
I was gonna ask the
yep,
same.
I'll go backwards.
So I want
Yeah.
to, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Carolyn? Okay, I think the first one you said was C2, is that right?
C2, second sentence, yeah.
Okay, second sentence. Okay, so this is who can request a meeting.
Yes, and so it said in addition to the student and or parents or guardians. So it could be just my interpretation where I'm not interpreting it correctly.
Oh, I think that,
Just made it sound like parents might be optional. is the
well,
way I read it.
parents, there could be an instance where a student asks for a meeting and the parents, of course, are notified, given
Yeah.
our policy. And then the parent elects to not come to the support meeting.
Okay,
So that would be an instance in which it would be and or.
okay. In C, before we get into the numbering, the last sentence in the first paragraph. And so this involves more than a casual declaration. Is there a definition of what that more than a casual declaration, or do we have like a sense of what that means?
Yes, this was actually something I asked Diane about at our very first meeting, because what I said was, how do you determine what a sincerely held belief is? Not to be funny, but like, how does one determine that? Has that ever been a challenge? And Diane was very clear that it's not question, like it's not an issue where they have a trouble determining, is this someone who's kind of like playing the system, doing something that's not insincere. I'll just leave it at that. So we're not characterizing what other people are doing, but an insincere belief or doing something that's not genuine and authentic. And Diane says it's never happened in our district and that the administration is very well equipped to address students who come forward with this sincere. And this policy goes beyond transgender students. We're kind of shorthanding with transgender students, but I would like to recognize that there's a lot more than just a binary gender identity within our school community right now. So there's a gender fluid students, there's non-binary students, those are different identifications. And then there's a myriad of things. And this policy really is intended to encompass all of them. It's really all encompassing it. So just to like, it's sincere held belief about your gender identity is respected where you are. That may not be on the binary. So that may not be, I'm identifying as a gender that I was not assigned at birth. That would be a transgender identification. It might be that I identify as both, and that changes at times. And so it's tricky, right? That's tricky. It's hard to understand. It's certainly something that's evolved in our culture and society. Like from when I grew up, this is not something that I grew up being informed about and well at all. And so it's sort of trying to learn it, and it's hard, but that was something that I did question the administration pretty intently on, which is, how do we guarantee parents that we know that staff know what they're doing? And I was very satisfied by the response, which is we've never encountered this. Like we would understand somebody who's not being authentic and being like having fidelity to this policy, and someone who's not being sincere. That's just not something that they really struggle with. But I don't think you can identify the line at which someone's sincere held belief about their identity happens. It's not a light switch. It's just not.
Yeah, and I would ask, maybe defer to you, Melissa, if we tried to define that, could we potentially be in trouble or in violation of discrimination laws if we tried to define what somebody's sincerely held belief is?
Well, I don't think you can. Because as was said, it's an individual thing. What we're looking for is sincerity. And I think I completely agree with Diane, and having worked with schools all over the state and in New Hampshire, understanding a sincerely held belief is not something that people who work with kids and know these kids day in and day out struggle with. They may struggle with how to support them, but they don't struggle with understanding whether that's sincere or not. And I think that part of this is trusting, as we heard over and over again, trusting these kids to be able to express what they're feeling. And it is true. And I think it's important that we are talking about gender expansiveness, not just transgender. Our firm put transgender into the name of the policy initially because we wanted, that's something that people are more, they understand that better. So we wanted to say, this is about transgender, but it's really about gender expansiveness. And it's about that whole universe of things that humans, students, adults, everybody can go through and that we want to support.
So can I just jump in real quick, if you don't mind? So first off, I wish that the students stayed because I prefer to talk to them directly. But I think we all kind of felt the same way, but I can only speak for me that it takes a lot of guts to get up there, especially in a time when people will judge who you are and what you think and how you visually possibly show yourself, possibly how you speak, whatever it might be. And so if those students are listening, I just want to commend you and understand that when you go through difficult times, this is a great test to show you that, you guys have the ability to stand up. You do have that bravery to stand up and the courage to do what you feel is right, regardless of what might happen. Right. And so I think that that's very important, especially at your age when you're dealing with so much. So although they're not here, I just wanted to make sure that I spoke to them, hoping that they do actually hear that, because I think that is something that's, as a former teacher and now as a parent, and now sitting on the school board and listening to all these different perspectives, I put myself in many different shoes as I'm listening to this conversation. And there have been many times when I have been the dad when I was also the teacher, right? And those kids viewed me as their only true parent figure. And so they would come to me and try to confide in me certain things. And we had to have the conversation about, in school, and I assume it's I didn't teach in the Scarborough School District, but I taught in 3 different ones over 11 years, that no school district was I ever a part of. Was it like, okay, we got to keep this a secret now? So I maybe this is a big assumption of mine, but I'm assuming that that's not happening here either. And we do have the best interest. People don't get into, education, teachers don't get into education to want to honestly deal with these issues because they're challenging. And there is a lot of, question around, did I handle that right? And whatnot. And so, I think we have to also give our teachers and our staff and our administration a little more, what do I want to say? Grace to deal with issues like this. And quite honestly, I think we deserve a little more grace for also having to deal with this, because this is a new world for us. And this is a new world for, just individuals going through it, realizing, oh, maybe that is how I identify. I didn't realize that was an option for me, but that's how I felt my whole life. Right. So I wanted to speak to the students, but I wanted to kind of speak to the greater community, because I think that it is important to understand that as a board, sometimes we have to come up to the start line of things that need to be addressed, even if it's difficult to have this conversation or if we have differing opinions or things like that. So I commend us for at least having that conversation, because I think that that's important. And granted, we do have a policy. I also wanted to clarify that, because I do feel like I've spoken to people in the community that don't quite understand that there's a policy that exists already. It's not like we're recreating the wheel here. So I think that is very, very important to understand that. And this policy was written, what was it, like 7 years ago, something like that. So it's also not, it's prior to me being here, but this was a while ago. So, and me reading through this, I see a lot more detail to it that I think just, to me, protects the students, but I do feel like I see the parents in here. The one thing that I would like to see, I think at the top of this, just because I felt like I was hearing it tonight and it was my one big concern going through this, is again, the parent involvement. Similar to what Carolyn was saying before too. So I don't know if there's a place up at the beginning that literally says our intention is with this policy, where it says this is a collaboration between family, school, and individual, because, or something similar to, I think Freyla put it really eloquently before, saying, the whole intention here was to make sure that parents were included every single step of the way. And so we want that, right? As a parent, I want that. As a teacher, honestly, I want that support too, right? So I'm assuming, I would assume that that's the case in the classroom as well. And I do believe that our counselors go through trainings and things like this. And I think that that's where down at the bottom, that's important to include as well, I would say, because I do think staff members need to be trained properly to understand how to have this conversation. Because when I got into education years ago, and I'm not there anymore, there were plenty of topics over the years, right? Like school safety and school shootings. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. The same thing here, like having these really hard conversations. I didn't know that's what I was getting into. So I think it's important with a policy like this that we do also have at the bottom E, right? And so I'm not saying anything needs to be changed there, but I think that, if anybody's questioning, hey, the vagueness, like it's left up to the superintendent or something like that, I think that it is important to do that, because teachers don't go get their bachelor's and their master's degree they don't go through those programs and take a class on how to have these difficult conversations. So I think that it's important that if we're going to move forward with this, that we genuinely think about what are some of those PD conversations that we can have to educate our teachers. And maybe we invite family to be a part of that. And that's a way to kind of collaborate with the community and show that, hey, this isn't, again, a behind the scenes thing. That is in no way, shape, or form our intention of this, that if we're going to have a PD as to how we talk to our teachers, and we would invite family to be a part of that potentially. I'm kind of just speaking freely, but I think that, there's a lot that I support here. I would just like to really see it strongly affirmed early on that, yes, our intention is to have parents involved throughout the process.
And maybe that's a way to get around the clarity that I'm perplexed about.
So what if in the second paragraph of the purpose, where it says administrators and school staff are expected to consider the needs of students on a case-by-case basis and to follow this policy and other available resources as appropriate? What if after student are expected to consider the student's needs on a case by case basis, comma, work in partnership with parents and guardians and to follow this policy and other available resources. Then you're conveying the intention to be a partnership with family rather than anything else. Does that work?
That sounded good. Can you just repeat it again?
Okay, so
Work in partnership.
So it's right now it says administrators and school staff are expected to consider the needs of students on a case by case basis and to follow this policy and other available resources as appropriate. The friendly amendment would say administrators and school staff are expected to consider the needs of students on a case by case basis, work in partnership with parents, guardians, and to follow this policy and other available resources as appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that gets at exactly what we're saying. Like,
I
you know,
think
it's,
so.
I think the hard piece about this, well, really any policy, it's trying to find the line between what is the state law cover, what is federal law cover, what are we going to cover in our policy, and then trying to make sure you come up with all of the applicable scenarios that could apply. And I know one constituent wrote us and said this should hold up to the test of time, right? And be, if it's not us sitting in these seats, if it's not Jeff and Diane sitting in these seats, would our intentions shine through in this policy? And so I think when you work on something so much, you feel like you're there, and then
Yeah.
it becomes perplexing when we're not quite there, right? And how do we fix that so that it's clear to everybody involved that if anybody picks up this policy that's not sitting at this table right now, they could totally follow this with what we intended them to follow.
And I have to say, I thank you for your suggestion. I think that's wonderful. Yeah. And I know you guys have put in a ton of work, and it's greatly appreciated because I know how it started and where it's evolved. And I see that work having put into being brought forth and put that fruit coming to bear here. And I think in my mind, where a lot of my questions come from is, you know, I see the news and I hear the stories, and it frightens me to, you know, what is happening in other school districts. And so I read this through that lens of, I want to make sure it's so tight that that can't happen here.
I speak to that because I definitely been thinking about this a lot. I know there's, I'm not happy that there's a lawsuit, but I'm excited at the opportunity to see more clarification, perhaps in a few years, come from a lawsuit that was filed yesterday that has to do a lot with exactly the heart of the issue that I hear being debated. Which I don't think really this policy is implicated by. We're having a conversation, but it's not about this policy. So I'm struggling with sort of those two things. But I was talking to someone about this exact case, and I'm going to reference the Daramascotta case that's at issue, and sort of the actions that happened in that case. And I said, let's follow through what we know about what happened from reading the paper, knowing that that's probably not 100% accurate. But a school staff did something, got involved in a situation, parents were kept in the dark. And then, you know, some physical items were provided in support of the student that were maybe medically, maybe not. I think that'll be determined. But sort of like a secret was kept, right? That's a perception about what happened. Whatever the reality is will be fleshed out in a different place. But sort of that's the concern, is that the staff member is taking a student by the hand. Don't tell, like, I'm not gonna tell your parents, you don't have to tell your parents. I know better than your parents about what you need to help you. I'm gonna give you material support on this journey. I'm gonna do it like kind of on my own. But what happened in that case is that was not policy. Like, that person wasn't following a policy. And I don't think you can write a policy that'll cover every possible outcome that is unintended in that. So like, you can't possibly think of everything that could go possibly wrong and write a policy for anomalous situations where people were likely breaching policy, right? Like I don't think that what happened there does not sound like it was appropriate, not having firsthand knowledge, reading it from the paper. But it is certainly, as a parent, frightening to think that a staff member at a school would take my child and actively encourage them to hide really important information. There's no way to write a policy that would stop somebody from doing something that they shouldn't do, right? Like it's a piece of paper, they should follow it. If you don't follow policy, there are disciplinary actions. Left better to Diane and Jeff. Like that process, like we refer them. And so if somebody is doing something that's wrong, that should be the policy, but we can't draft a policy to think about every possible thing that could go wrong. Like that's just not possible. We have to draft a policy with the assumption that it'll be followed by staff members with some fidelity, right? Like that's, we have to assume good intentions on the part of our staff. I don't think we have to. I think from what I've seen, our staff is extremely dedicated. And I think I can very, very much infer good intentions from our staff members. And so we have to assume with our policies that they will be followed and they'll be put in practice. I don't think we can write a policy that stops somebody from doing something like that's not intended by the policy. And that's like my concern. So we can't fight the situation in Damariscotta through this policy. Like there's nothing we can draft in here that's good, that'll stop that situation from happening, or many of the others. I mean, they're all over the country. I've heard of them as well. And they are frightening. Like that is scary. I don't think we can write a policy that'll make people feel like, and I don't want people to think that we can write a policy that will stop somebody who's intending on doing something wrong. We can't do that with policy. We can't do it with criminal laws. I can tell you that much. How much time do you have? We can't do it with policy. We have to write policy for what we want people to do. We tighten up the language so it wasn't guidance, it wasn't should, it wasn't, it's intended to be you will. You will do this. And if you don't do this, you are in violation of this policy. Go to the principal's office. Whatever the form that is, when in this district, like that's a disciplinary action. And so that's what I'm struggling with. So when it got to the policy, all of the fears that I've heard about, that I share in some instances, that when I think about what I want for my children, I want to know that if one of my children comes out and is gender diverse, or gender expansive, or whatever they identify with, I want to make sure that they come into a school where they will be supported, that if they're being harassed or bullied, which we know disproportionately happens to this vulnerable population, that staff members have something to go to make sure that they are supported. I hope that I know that ahead of time. One of the things that gave me great comfort is when a conversation I had with Diane, where I just kept going after, has this ever happened? Have you had a situation where you've encountered a student whose family had no idea and that, was struggling? That's not something that we can assume never happens. Like that is something that this policy should consider and does. But in reality, our parents do know their kids. Parents know their kids. They understand if their kids are going through situations. They might know exactly the inner workings of every teenage brain, who does, but like they know there's something going on. And so that relationship has to be built between parents and children. And again, the school is so supportive, but we're not at that table. We can't be. We just can support the students as they come. And again, invite parents in. We would never have a meeting about any other topic at school that a parent wasn't invited to. That was defining minute for this policy. That was important to us. Parents were not optional. They were in some of the other policies. They're not optional. Parents are invited. You can't force anyone to the table, but you can invite everybody in, and that's what this policy is intended. We really do inviting people in.
Can I just add that, reading through the policy and I'm not part of the policy committee. I'm not part of the DEI committee. So I do commend you guys for putting in the hard work and getting the language as best as you can get it to. I think the way that it's written right now is actually worded in a way that supports parent involvement a lot better. It opens up an opportunity for parents to get involved. It's listing ways that we can say we're going to support the child as they go through. We can't force them to do anything, but we can support them in their journey along this way. So I think the wording, the time you guys put into this to get it where it is, I think to Brian's point, I think, maybe we can tighten up the purpose a little bit more just to make it very clear that this is a partnership. Like like you said up there. And I think, I think the way that it's written right now, it is very supportive of both sides, children's rights and parental rights.
Do you feel that there's pieces that are unclear, though? I wanted to go back to that. There were a couple of words that we could just make into shall, maybe we missed. We really wanted to make sure that staff knew, felt supported, they knew what they were, but anybody looking at it knew what exactly was going to happen. So if it's not clear reading it, we definitely want to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple places I noticed where there was should instead of shall or will, or whatever the proper terminology is, just to make it crystal clear and allay my fears.
If you email those to us at the next policy meeting, I'll make sure we
Yeah,
get all.
absolutely, absolutely. And just a quick question, hopefully a quick question on C3. It talks about notifying the parents. Let me read it here again. Refamiliarize myself. Is there any tightening up as to like how much time can elapse before a parent is notified? It's just a question that popped into my mind while I was reading it. I'm like, well, how long? I'm just wondering how long it can take before a parent is notified. I mean, is it, in my mind, it should be like, days or a week, whatever, but.
Yes, so I think there's two different questions here.
Okay.
Under the policy, this is in the planned policy, so it would be in time to invite them to the meeting, which is
Okay.
imminent, because this should be an issue that needs to be addressed. So it shouldn't be long. But again, it's not triggered by, this is triggered by a meeting. So if a meeting is
Okay.
scheduled, that's when a parent will be informed after the student is notified. So it gives the students the right of notification.
Okay.
Is there any statute that would say like, oh, I know with an IEP, there's up to a certain amount of time. We would want to act on it right away. I mean, I think that's clear because it's a sport.
No, just to be clear, there's no statute that requires the notification. That's a local decision. So that wouldn't, I think, just from sort of a legal standpoint, putting a time limit in a policy would be unworkable.
Yeah.
If the parents are in China or the parents are, I mean, you don't want to have people violating a policy because of things that aren't in their control. I think what you're saying here is, and I think it's clear from the policy, the parents are part of this. And so I think anybody reading this policy knows we got to make that happen. This part, I think, is just to make it clear that as a practical matter, we're going to let the kid go home and tell his parents before we call and do that. And we do that, I think, in education on a lot of other things. Before you tell the parents, you let the student talk to its parents first.
No, that makes sense. And I was just, maybe it's just my accounting brain versus policy brain in conflict here, getting in the way to understanding that, okay, section C, it does say support plans at the top, but I guess I think I'm muddying it with others. So I could think I need to focus more that C is really support plans.
I had to
versus
do that
general.
too, honestly, Carolyn.
Yeah.
When, I think I said this at least 582 times in policy meetings. What is the purpose
Yeah.
of this section?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this section? What is the purpose of this section? Because it's easy to kind of go down that road of, okay, well, what if this, then what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So I
think
went down
that's-
that rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's totally understandable.
Yeah. I should have attended all those meetings.
No.
And I could be totally caught up with you. Okay, at the last sentence on C6, where it talks about, the superintendent shall be consulted. So what does this mean? Does it mean that the superintendent makes the final decision, or it does? Okay,
And let me
It's-
explain why.
okay. good.
So this, we would like ideally for everybody at the table to come to consensus,
Mhm.
right? Like that's the goal. If there's an element that there is not consensus, this is a
Mhm.
school plan
Okay,
for things that happen within the school. And so the person who makes is the final arbiter of
Mhm.
what happens in the school is the superintendent. So this would, we don't anticipate this happening. These plans have been drafted for quite a while. So this is not a new process that's going to start with this policy. It's an ongoing process that we're really refining.
Mhm.
And I don't believe this has ever been required. To my knowledge, I've actually asked if we've ever had this issue happen, and we haven't. The people at the table, hopefully centering the students' needs, have been able to reach consensus on what happens at the school. But at the final person who has the final say of what happens within the school building
Mhm.
on a school plan should be the superintendent, not what happens with the student.
Mhm.
Like the student is their parents' responsibility, but what functionally happens within the school, that's a superintendent's call.
Um, And then I think I had a few questions on when I was looking at the clean copy. And when I'm comparing the clean copy to the strike through version on the support plan, there were some things on the clean copy or on the strike through version that were stricken through, but not stricken through on the clean copy as far as the support plan. So I'm gonna assume that, so it's the ACAAE. So I'm going to assume that maybe the clean, what was attached to the clean, maybe just didn't have the strike. Was the pre-clean maybe?
Yeah, let me go look really quick so I can.
So.
Okay, so this
It
is-
all, and it could be my printing.
So you have the sample
Like that.
plan, that one that says, DWM sample plan at the top. That was on the website. Is that the one you're talking about?
Okay, no, I'm looking at ACAAE. This one, it says
Right.
draft on it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the draft is, okay, so that's. I think that's the clean.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the strike through version.
The changes are on the working.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, so I was just curious.
We have quite.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Do the strike through.
no,
know,
this has been we made edits at our meeting
Okay.
that somehow didn't save. And so we had to go back in and make edits a second time, and I'm guessing from, I'm hearing from Diane, they maybe didn't carry through again.
Okay. Nope, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure because I was pretty good with the strike through version. So I just wanted to double check on that.
Yeah, I think if you go by the strike through version.
Okay.
And then we can work through why those didn't carry over to the draft.
No, that's, yeah. Technology is great until it's not. I get it.
And for clarification, I guess that is the 2022 working policy 4623. Okay.
Can I ask a question really quick? Melissa, I think this is for you. I want to go back to a question we were asked earlier. Because I'm not clear, I'm just mulling it in my head and I don't believe this is the place, but this policy is the place, but I want to get your thoughts. So I asked you the first question, restroom and locker room use is protected by state law. The case has moved before the Supreme Court. I understand that piece and I appreciate you affirming that for me tonight. My question is, the question we were asked earlier, what about students that would prefer to not be in a locker room or a restroom with a student who is transgender or gender expansive? I guess I'm unclear on what their rights are. I don't know if I'm making sense.
I think you are. And I think that a lot of schools, if somebody's not comfortable with that, they'll provide another place for someone who's not comfortable. But what the way the law looks at this, and I'm just going to tell you the legal way, is that if you can't discriminate, you can't discriminate, even if people aren't comfortable with the person who's different, you still can't discriminate. So take it to a something we would all understand. If back in the day, maybe I was the only person alive, and maybe maybe I wasn't even alive then. So let's go with that. So we're desegregating, and so now we have students of color using a bathroom, and there might have been white kids who were not comfortable with that. And the law says, we don't care. You need to we're going to let everybody use the bathroom. And if you're uncomfortable, then we'll try to find someplace else for you, or we won't. But that's the way that a court and the Human Rights Commission would look at the same issue with a transgender or gender expansive student. Does that make sense?
That does.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're okay with that? Biological sex of kids? Undressing, changing clothes?
I'm sorry, we can't engage in the back and forth. I'm sorry.
That's ridiculous.
So maybe the question to ask is, what do we do as Scarborough School to accommodate children who may be uncomfortable? What amenities do we have for children that don't want to share a bathroom or a locker room?
So I think to Melissa's point, if a student was uncomfortable sharing a locker room, that student who is uncomfortable could utilize a more private facility. You know, at the middle school, for example, like most of the bathrooms there are unisex. So, you know, there aren't the group bathrooms. It's just the way the school was built and organized. And, you know, but certainly if there was someone who said, I feel awkward or uncomfortable, then the school would make an accommodation for the person who felt uncomfortable, not for the person that they feel uncomfortable with.
And there are special bathrooms. Is that correct? That if a student needed a separate, I believe that's actually in our.
Yeah,
policy.
we've identified unisex bathrooms across all of our buildings.
Yeah.
So does unisex mean like single stall, or what does that mean? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
And that's not just for, I mean, that's for students who are uncomfortable for a whole wide range. So we're not treating gender expansive students differently than anybody else. If you're uncomfortable using a group facility, we're going to provide you some privacy that will make you comfortable. It's all about making people feel comfortable, I think.
Yeah, I would say that to me, that, and I can use my personal life, you know, you go to the gym and there are plenty of guys in an open locker room that literally just, you know, get naked and change themselves. I have never been that person. So I prefer to go get changed in a stall because it's more comfortable to me. Now, are they other men that are in there? Yeah. You know, but for me, it's what's more comfortable. So I do what makes me feel more comfortable. And honestly, I think I had a similar question that was asked, but I think your analogy of going back to segregation, I mean, I don't think there's a better analogy than that. So I think that's spot on in terms of the law.
Are there any other questions, discussion, comments?
One more on the strike through version of or the red line version of the support plan. On F, I think it's F. Where on number 3 and number 6. I just found it odd that we lump parents or community together. I just feel like they're two completely different. Maybe it's just me getting fussy, but two completely different.
I don't believe that was in reference to the parents of the student.
Okay.
It is
Other
of
parents.
other parents in general or
Okay.
community members.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that you bring up a good clarification because it does say other students, so maybe it should just say other
Other
parents.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm still trying to get to the correct strike through.
It's
G, F. On
The
strike
new
through.
F.
In the section under dialogue.
Dialogue, okay. Okay, so I'm sorry, tell us one more time. Under F, the parents.
Yeah, under F, dialogue, number 3 and number 6. To Brian's point, maybe add other parents.
It actually wasn't. It was actually parents. We had this discussion, we went back and forth. And the reason the reason we wanted this was that
Mhm.
the parents are at the table. So this isn't
Okay.
like happening in the secret. This is not hiding anything.
Mhm.
But this is very clear so that the student knows, and I think this might be more in. So it's actually easier with transgender students than it would be with a gender fluid student because the way you refer to a gender fluid student would change perhaps. But this is an agreement with the student and the parent there ideally, or at least invited to be there, and the building administrator about how staff will refer to this student moving forward. So how is this teacher or staff member, how is the school going to talk to this student about the student to other students? How are they going to talk about the student to staff members, and how are they going to refer to this person in the community and with their parents? But the parent's there. It's not like the parent's not there. The parent is part of that conversation. In the same way, so the student is also going to identify, and it's going to be documented what the student says at that meeting. How are they going to refer to themselves to other students? How are they going to refer to themselves to other staff members? And how are they going to refer to themselves to their parents and their community? Because they may be different.
Right, like an example, like a concert or something with the student may not want the wide community to know their whatever they may have chosen. So they may stick with something else for something like that.
But no
that's
way
a
is
good
this
example.
behind the parent's back. The
Right.
parent is at the table and part of drafting of this plan. So, and they're entitled to a copy of it.
So the very first part of this plan says though, are parents aware of the student's gender status? And that seems confusing to me.
We took that out.
That was supposed to be struck through.
Oh,
That
okay.
is
I
not
just have an
true.
old thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
that should have been struck.
You
through.
did the right thing.
Yeah, we did strike that out, yeah. So if I go, if I go back to the F, the new F, the dialogue, so does, Carolyn, does that seem to make sense, or did you, I think I missed what you asked to change it to.
Yeah, no, it just seemed like a very broad lumping of parents or community. Because parents and community are two completely different things.
We could add another
So,
box. That would be fine.
That was
The parent-
actually what I was thinking.
Yeah,
So,
because the thought
yeah,
was kids, school,
Yeah,
community, but we could certainly widen the box.
yeah, I would appreciate that.
I would just add that, again, this is a plan that we've been using, even though it,
Yeah.
wasn't under policy and procedure. And so in its current format, it's been utilized with what I just described, which is when other parents ask, what will be the agreement as to what is said?
Mhm. Okay.
So, that, I just wanted to point out that.
Okay.
Let's do the same. Okay, got those.
Thank you.
Well, do you have any other questions or edits?
You made it through my list.
We did. All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there any other questions or dialogue questions from Melissa? While she's here, any other comments? All right, thank you so
So
much.
should I
for-
sit down?
Yes, thank you
If
for
you
joining
insist.
us today, Melissa. We appreciate it greatly. All right, so we've had our discussion. Okay, so let's we are all in person, so we can vote via hands. All in favor of the first reading. Remember, we bundled first reading of policy ACAAA, transgender and gender expansive students, and the first reading of policy ACAAAE, transgender student support plan. All in favor?
Can I get clarity on that? So, because it sounds like there's some edits that still need to be made.
Yeah, so what happens is we are approving the first reading, so then the edits will go back to the policy committee, which is meeting the 10th. And then we will discuss and put those edits in, and when you get it at second reading, it will have incorporated. Likely
Okay.
incorporated the changes.
That's what I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
so we're just approving the first reading of it tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so all in favor? Okay, and all opposed?
Yeah, you can abstain.
You can abstain, yeah. Okay, so one abstain, okay. Perfect, thank you. Okay, and then I'm going to bundle 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, and 11.6, which is the meeting minutes of March 13th, 2023, FY 24 budget workshop session 1. Meeting minutes of March 15th, 2023, FY 24 budget workshop session number 2. The meeting minutes of March 16th, 2023, the workshop. And the meeting minutes of March 16th, 2023, business meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous, thank you. Okay, agenda item 11.7 is appointments, our appointments, excuse me. 11.7.1 is the Director of Curriculum and Assessment.
First of all, I'm going to actually turn this over to Diane and thank her for her leadership and leading up the search committee for our next curriculum director, who is here this evening. And I wanted to give her the opportunity to meet everyone, and then also for Diane to say a few words, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. So Katie Vitro, who is here this evening, has been chosen to fill this position due to retirement. Katie received her Bachelor of Arts degree in English from UMaine Farmington and her Master of Science in Teaching and Learning from the University of Southern Maine. She has been both a classroom teacher and an instructional coach, a tech coach for 9 years. She's also served as a pre-K-5 Dean of Students and an assistant principal for the last 3 years. Katie came really highly recommended to us for a variety of reasons, and I just want to highlight those here. Things that were said about Katie was her very collaborative instructional leadership that she's demonstrated at the building level. Her ability to serve as a resource and thinking partner to those around her and those people that she works with, and her laser focus on meeting the needs of students. And in talking with Katie over the last couple of interviews that we've had with her in our time in both of our panels that participated in part of the committee, it was very evident to both committees that Katie's heart is definitely with curriculum and instruction. And so we are very excited to recommend her to all of you this evening. And Katie, if you would like to come up to the mic and say a couple of words, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. As they said, my name's Katie Vitro. I've been in education for over 15 years now. And most importantly, when I think about what am I about educationally, you'll certainly get to know that over time because I'm pretty outspoken about the things I'm passionate about. But it always comes back to providing students with educational experiences from the first step in the door in kindergarten to when they graduate 2,301 days later. Providing those educational experiences that lead to competence and confidence. It's what I always go back to. Are our students competent and confident to choose the pathways they want to pursue in life? That's our job as educators. So I'm excited to bring that passion to Scarborough and really get to dive into this district and work with you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve the director of curriculum and assessment?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Right, well, I will just say congratulations and welcome to Scarborough. So with that, all in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you and congratulations. Thank you. All right, 11.7.2 is the Scarborough High School Spring Coaches.
Yeah, I would just bundle all of these names, high school and middle school together for approval.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve 11.7.2, the Scarborough High School Spring Coaches, and 11.7.3, that's Scarborough Middle School Spring Coaches as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 12.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you and have a good evening.